Welcome to my YouTube channel. I don't do this often, but today I'll be talking about the Sepia Bride debacle. Is she a bridezilla or was the photographer totally in the wrong? I'll be sharing my thoughts and suggestions, and hopefully we can all learn from this experience so we never have to go through it ourselves. I'll be breaking this video into three segments. The first would be my objective view on what the bride and the photographer did wrong. The second would be my personal, opinion on the matter, and then the third would be me sharing, lessons and takeaways we can all implement moving forward to help better our businesses. Sepia Bride is a woman based in America, and in her TikTok, series that she sort of called my wedding photographer horror experience, she says that she says she pays a photographer almost $8,000 only, to be met with a situation where she voices her concerns and the photographer threatens to sue her for slander. So that's sort of like, in a nutshell, the gist of it. I cannot even lie, the way this woman started her, 20-part series, it started like she was ready to, fight, ready to make this go viral or trendy. And it really reminded me of Returnees, Who the Fuck Did I Marry? 50-part series. So the lady sort of came with that energy, and I'm not surprised. It's taken over the whole industry and everyone has been talking about the Sepia Bride. So she came with some sort of vim. So I was already like, okay, are you trying to resolve this, or are you, trying to trend? But that's aside. Anyway, she goes on in the video to say she loved the photographer's work, she had seen it. The photographer had also delivered some images from maybe a dinner party they had before the wedding day or something like that, and she loved those images. So it's not like she didn't love the photographer's work. It was just some particular solo portraits of herself and a few with her husband and parents that sort of had that issue that was sort of overly done. Her teeth, she made mention of her teeth and dress were not white, and she showed you can clearly see she has white teeth. And she also showed some other pictures from someone who had taken in the wedding showing what her wedding dress looked like. She also talked about her mother's dress being pink, but the photographer's edits changed it to coral. She talked about some images where her eyes looked really dark, like she had a black eye, and she was like, I'm a makeup artist, my makeup did not just look great. So she had a lot of things to pick out of what she didn't eventually like about her wedding images. So Sepia Bride goes on to say, at first when she received her gallery, she was totally happy, excited, but then 30 days later she kept wondering there's something bothering her about her images. She just couldn't pinpoint what, and eventually she realized that it's the editing, the sepia is a lot on the images. So that's when she went back to the photographer to voice her concerns. And I think initially the photographer was trying to work with her, so the photographer enhanced some images. She said her makeup wasn't looking great, but she still didn't like that. She also asked the photographer to give some raws. I think the photographer gave her a few raws, and so I think at the time that was where the main issue really started from, once the photographer gave her the raws, because she went on to just I guess just enhance the natural colors, and then she preferred what she had done over what the photographer had done. And that's where the real issue began, because now she was requesting for more raws from the photographer, but the photographer was unwilling to give the raws. And I can totally understand that. As photographers, our raws is you don't go to for example, you don't go to a restaurant. If you don't like a particular dish, then you choose something else. You don't tell the chef to oh no, I'm gonna come back to the kitchen, give me the raw chicken, I'm gonna spice it up myself and make something. You just don't do that. When our images, our intellectual property, the copyright belongs to us, only in certain instances agreed upon will a photographer ever give a client the raws. This can happen in commercial work and advertising and stuff like that. But so I can see why the photographer was hesitant. So I think they were going back and forth, and the bride was willing to pay, but the photographer quoted her $4,000, and she was like, nope, not having it, that's ridiculous, I'm not going to pay the amount for my raws. Why are you holding my photos hostage? Give me my photos. So that was sort of like the tug and pull between the bride and the photographer. So now I would go over to talk about what I believe Sepia Bride did wrong, and I think she really fell short in her research. So now when you're choosing a photographer, one of the major things you should be paying attention to is the photographer's editing style, because at the end of the day, that's going to be your final product from the whole photo shoot session, right? But this bride started her whole video talking, and in some other parts, talking about how she loved the photographer's work, the editing was lovely, you know, she liked that sort of sun, tan, yellowish, you know, tints to the images. So why is it now, because you've seen what the raws look like, you're then nitpicking every single thing about the photographer's work and bashing the photographer's work? You know, talking about, she talked about the outfits of her mom, she talked about, you know, the sepia just being too much. But I'm like, well, you loved the photographer's work. And I think this is where people need to educate themselves before they make a big investment, such as choosing a wedding photographer. I'll give an example. I'm not a tech head at all. I don't know much about, you know, laptops, but whenever I've wanted to change my laptop, like buy a new laptop, within a month of me making that purchase, you would think I was the biggest laptop, you know, techie head, because I would do all the research, find out about RAM, find out about processing power, find out about storage. I would find out about so many things so that I'm really knowledgeable, and when it comes time for me to then purchase a laptop, I'm doing that with that, you know, knowledge and insight. I'm not going to buy a laptop and then come around 30 days later and start telling the seller that, oh, you didn't tell me this about the laptop and that. It's like, no, the information is out there. Research. If you do your research, you'll find lots of blogs. Photographers write blogs about, you know, things that has to do with the wedding photography. You should have researched and found photographers who have taken pictures in the venue your wedding was going to be. For example, I know people do that. I'm not a wedding photographer myself, but I know I've seen blogs where wedding photographers talk about the different venues they shoot at, and that way you can see the photographer's style there, and, you know, be able to decide for yourself if that's what you want your images to look like. Because when you just get stuck on looking at a photographer's work on Instagram, I'm so sorry, but it's different. Instagram is quite curated, and you're not seeing the whole flow of the photographers in the wedding gallery. So Sepia Bride also said, you know, in that same wedding shoot, the inside shots were beautiful, she loved it. I think it was just the outdoor shoots that really threw her off. And so you also need to do that research to see, you know, on this sort of backdrop, in the lush greenery area, what does this photographer's work look like? Unfortunately, you wouldn't know just going in, but that's why you have to do your research before you make a big investment. And so now, bashing the photographer online and, you know, creating this whole trend about it is obviously ruining her business. So I can understand why the photographer is threatening to sue you for slander, because you're interfering with her business. And it's sort of like, oh, the Sepia Bride said in the future she would ask for the copyright of the images, and I'm just like, don't be ridiculous. The copyright and is the intellectual property of the photographer. At no point will the photographer just hand you the copyright to images. So I think this bride got a bit ridiculous. And it's sort of like, if you make ridiculous demands out of your service provider, you would also get a ridiculous invoicing. Simples. Okay, so now I'm going to move over to what the photographer did wrong. I think it would be amiss for me to not highlight some of this. And for me, integrity is very important, and it's always good to call out when something is wrong. And so the first thing I'll say the photographer did wrong was to not go into each of the individual images to adjust the presets. So now as photographers, you know, working digitally, that's one of the amazing, you know, advantages, is that we can work with presets. So you can create a preset for a certain photo shoot and gallery, and you can then apply and sync it to the rest of the images. But what you have to do is then still go to individual images adjust the lighting, adjust the coloring, adjust what needs to be adjusted to make sure even though the overall preset is there, you're still editing for the individual pictures. And I could clearly see what the bride was talking about, because why the overall sepia of the image could have been fine, but when it came to her skin and the dress, it's like, why is it so yellowish? I personally don't like that editing style at all, so I can sort of see when it is overly done. And if the photographer could have just individually looked at those and literally go in Lightroom, go to like, you know, the HSL tab and just go to the saturation slider on the orange one and just pull the orange slider back, you would get those orangey, overly orangey tones out of the skin and out of the dress, but the rest of the image will still have, you know, the tint you want it to have. So I think that was a bit lazy of the photographer, and to have been paid almost $8,000 and not be able to take out the time to individually edit the images, I don't know how you can explain that one. If the bride had gone for a cheap photographer, I'd have said, oh, okay, you get what you pay for, but that's not the case here. So the second thing I would say is we often tell, you know, say, oh, we should lead with empathy, we should treat other people how we would like to be treated. But I think a lot of people forget to do this when they find themselves in a tricky situation. So I think, you know, as a photographer myself, for me, it's really important that my clients leave the whole session, have a lasting memory of their working relationship with me as a positive one. So if a client was to come back to me to ask for some, you know, retouch here and there, I will understand. So I don't quite get why the photographer was not trying to, you know, remedy the situation, and it had to go to this back and forth of like, okay, send me the raws, let me do it myself. You never want to get to that position where the client gets, you know, so fed up of the whole situation, they're just like, you know, just give me the raws, because it's like, but I wouldn't give you the raws. So like, try and remedy that, you know, relationship so it goes better. So now I'm going to move on to my personal thoughts, and I'm sure you could have already sensed it from what I was saying previously. So I know this whole, you know, trend of editing styles, you know, pushing the yellows, pushing the oranges, pushing, you know, the teals, were really trendy in the last couple of years, and I think it was really intensified by Instagram as well, and people trying to stand out. And now, you know, there's so many photographers than ever before, I can imagine. Everyone wants to stand out from the other photographers, so, and the way you can do that a lot of the time is through your editing style. But I think people should still be mindful of what they are creating. If you're creating your own body of work, your own personal project, you can go mad, you can go as abstract as you want to be, you can go as futuristic as you want to be, and as crazy as you want to be. Well, when you're doing documentary photography, something like a wedding photo shoot, I feel like you should still be a bit realistic with like the colorings. For example, when a bride chooses, let's say, a blue color for her bridesmaids and a particular colors for her parents, I think it's just too much changing the actual tones of those colors into like something else just because that's your editing style. I think there's a time and place for your editing style, but when it comes to natural colors, you also need to be careful in how you edit when it's documentary work you're doing, because at the end of the day, you're preserving someone's memories. They want to look back at their pictures 20-30 years from now and remember the gorgeous, you know, reality of their wedding. They don't want to like just see your editing style, then it becomes worthless to them. The memory becomes invaluable because that's not what you actually was, you know. Weddings are so expensive. Brides and grooms tend to be intentional. Well, I would like to think they're intentional with what they choose. So why change that totally? I'll give an example. So with my editing style, I love to pull the greens more towards the yellowish tint, and so with the preset I use is usually just there. But whenever I've had a client actually wear a green outfit, I would go individually to those outfits that she's in the green and take off that slider from the yellow and push it back to the greens, because this client loves green. Green is her favorite color and she's worn it for her photo shoot. Why am I going to ruin that by saying, oh, it's my style to have the greens look yellowish and leave it like that? It's like, I think we also need to lead with sympathy, and in a way I feel it's common sense as well. It's like, duh, she chose that color for a reason. Your editing style, yes, as a photographer, I don't want to take that away from anyone before anyone comes for me. Your style is your style. The bride should have done her research, but I'm still saying here, go into individual images, and the ones where your editing style has totally changed the coloring of the outfit so much, just pull that back. That's not gonna kill you. You're not gonna look at these photos in 30 years time, probably not, but this bride is gonna have these images for the rest of her life. Like, just, you know, make her feel good. She's paid you for a service. That's how I feel in that regard. Also, the second thing I'll say is, during consultations, photographers should really go through their whole process with clients. You know, tell them, oh, have you looked at my web? Even if you say, oh yeah, I found you on Instagram, it's like, okay, cool. Have you looked at my website? Have you seen my portfolio? What, you know, what are you drawn to about my images? These are questions I ask my clients. What are you drawn to about my images? You know, and then they also get to see my album, show them sample albums. So away from Instagram and that small, and this is what I keep telling people when they're like, digital images, I'm like, digital images are fine, but like the essence of a photograph is having the print in your hand. And so it's good to like show your clients what your sample albums look like, so they can see the physical product, see your editing style, and decide for themselves if they would like to go along to book you. So I must also stand up for the photographer. It must be very infuriating to have a client who has like gushed about her images and said she loved them, only to come back a month later and start giving you all these concerns. Like, at that point, you've probably closed down the account, you're working on new clients, you're working on marketing. There's so many things that goes into running a photography business. Guys, it's not just this post you see on Instagram. We do a whole lot behind the scenes. So I can understand someone coming back to you after a month, start placing all these concerns, then you have to go back to your hard drive, pull it up, and it's a lot. So I can see where that could have been really annoying for the photographer. And I think the bride, in the end, willing to pay a bit extra to like, you know, get to a, you know, compromisable place, should have like maybe, I mean, not just money should have made the photographer consider, but I guess leading with empathy, what I said previously, should have made the photographer still be like, okay, this is annoying, but whatever, let me go ahead and do it. And I say this because we need to charge properly as photographers, because once in a very blue moon, we may encounter a situation like this where a client is not totally happy with the end product, and we need to, you know, rectify it. We need to remedy it in some ways. When you've been paid well and you've been paid for your time, and you sort of, you know, calculated your cost and factored in all these sort of happenstances, you'll be able to just, you know, with joy and happiness, fulfill the order to make the client happy. But when you've not priced yourself properly, then you'll be like, oh, you just paid me this and now I have to do all this, you know, more work. That would piss you off. So now I'm just saying this generally. I know in this case that was not what happened, because this Sepia Bride has said she paid the photographer almost 8,000. So for me, I run my business in the sort of principles and values I hold, and it's sort of like, if someone has gone for such a large package, I think within my services I should be able to make corrections. So you should have a number of corrections you can make for your client before you're like, okay, you need to pay extra to get any more corrections. So we should all probably consider having a clause in our contract where if the client doesn't like our color editing, you can just give them the natural editing of how it was on the day. And I do have this in my contract, and I've had it since I started, with due to an amazing photographer who had said she had it in hers. And for me, it just makes sense. This is my editing style. This is what I will present to you. If in the unfortunate instance you don't like that, I will just give you the natural colorings, then just, you know, enhanced and increase the vibrance, and that's it. And if the client still doesn't like the natural, then they would have to pay for more edits, and that's just was in my contract, and that has never happened in my case, thank God. But it's good to have that. It's good to have that sympathy, you know, to just help clients see that you're actually here for them. You're here to provide, you know, a service for them and ensure they're happy no matter what happens, you know, 30 days down the line after the photo shoot. But let me give a breakdown of what I believe the general public should be looking out for when they're trying to book a photographer. The first should be the editing style. There are lots of different editing styles, but there are also lots of similar editing styles. So if you like a particular editing style, I bet you if you do your proper research, you'll find at least other 5 photographers who have similar editing styles. So you can't, I don't think, unless you're doing something so conceptual, something so creative, that the client is literally creating something out from scratch, original, you would find a few people that has that editing style you would love. So I would say find a couple of people, maybe you find 6 people. Okay, the next step now is to look at their services. Do you vibe with their personality? Do you think, you know, you would love them to capture you in your event, vulnerable moments, whatever that is? How do you guys align? How does your values align? That's one aspect. The second thing you should be looking for, what is their customer service like? You know, when you email them, how quickly do they respond? Do they, you know, have calls with you? Are they clear with, like, you know, what you can expect from them and what they expect from you? That's really important. And then the next thing you should also be looking for is what's in their contract, what are their terms, how does the terms favor you as well as them, you know? So you should be looking out for those things. And I think once you've gone through those steps of those important things to look out for, then you can finally look at the price range. So at this point, I would like to think you've narrowed it down to maybe 3 or 2 photographers that have hit these other important things you're looking out for. Then you can look at, okay, what are they offering for this? What are they offering for that? And what is my price? What is my budget? And how does it fit around what they're offering? Then the price should be the last thing you're going for. You then pick the photographer, you know, that goes within your price range because they've already hit all the other points. You love their editing style, you vibe together, their customer service is good, their contract terms is good for you, then their pricing is good for you, then you go with the photographer. But when people do it the other way around, they're just like, who is the cheapest photographer? And they're just going on price, and then the final end product becomes one of the last thing they consider, and then it's like you get what you paid for. That's not the case here, but just as a lesson, as a takeaway for the general public, people are not photographers, because I could see in lots of the comments, oh, we're not photographers, so how can we know? You can know by doing your research, right? If you're gonna buy a TV, I remember the TV, I moved out for the first time 2 years ago, and I was going to buy my own TV for the first time. I know nothing about TVs. I had to go and research because there were so many different ones, even in the same price range. They were also saying different, and I was just like, how do I know which one to get? This is so confusing. I never knew. I had to research, you know, TV types until I was in the position to buy one for the first time. Then I started hearing of sound quality, and I was seeing reviews, oh, this TV sound quality is not good. And it was also confusing. So I can't also just make a shoddy decision and then start blaming it on the manufacturers. It's like, no, you do your research, you do your due diligence. So you're ensuring you're picking the best thing for you. So that's what I'm gonna say. I hope all of these takeaways make sense and you're finding them helpful and useful. Anyway, so I hope this video has, you know, shed some light on the different parts of the arguments to help you to see, you know, as a bride, what you should be looking out for as a photographer, how you should be conducting business, and everyone can just grow from this experience and just ensure it doesn't happen in the future. So if you found this video insightful, I know you would enjoy this one where I talk about everything I include in my preparation guide to help clients get ready for their session with me. So that's it for this video. Until next time, remember, you don't have to be a struggling artist.